In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you the Eternal Battlemage build, which is a level 50 Sorceress build that focuses on tier 3 of the game, farming of Helltides and Nightmare dungeons, and making them a lot less stressful. If you've been looking for a powerful Sorc build and you don't want to keep dying, give this Eternal Battlemage a try. This build assumes you'll be approaching level 50, and if you're progressing this from another build, the Elementalist is the simplest starting point, but any build can successfully merge in. You may have to reallocate some points, and in general you want to be flexible with your point choices to adapt your exact style, but the mantra of this build is resistances, barriers, and cooldowns. The jump from tier 1 and 2 to tier 3 can be very painful for players, as monsters will gain affixes and elemental damage that you probably are not ready for. There is also a special Helltide event that takes over a region during which you gather currency that you must spend within an hour of the event. If you die, you lose 50% of your carried currency, making death a really sucky thing to happen, as you get locked out of valuable rewards. If you're coming into this from our Elementalist build, you'll find the skills have remained pretty much the same. However, we are using them a bit differently, and have put more of a focus on passives and extra boosts. Your main gameplay rotation will be to round up enemies and go to the middle of them, summon your Hydra for passive damage, cast Frost Nova, then spam Fireball until you don't have mana, and use Arc Lash to build it back up and stun enemies. You'll use Fire Shield and Frost Armor as your bubbles, and both can give you survivability and damage. Crowd control is an essential part of staying alive and dealing damage, but since we're creating a multi-element build, we'll be able to freeze and burn enemies as well. Our approach to combat will be to get into the middle of all groups of enemies, crowd control them, and blast them away with powerful fireballs, and then rebuild our mana with Arc Lash. For this purpose, we'll use Firebolt as our enchantment, so all of our direct damage applies burning. This means your AoE Arc Lash will be doing lightning and burning damage whenever you hit close enemies. Because you're standing in the middle of a group, you need to be able to survive pools dropped under you. The synergies for this multi-element setup come from Potent Warding, which gives you an extra 2% elemental resistances plus 1% of your fire and ice elements. Elemental Attunement, that gives you a 10% chance to reset your defensive skills, aka Frost Nova, Ice Armor, and Flame Shield. Align the Elements will give you up to 40% less damage from elites, and Mana Shield will give you 10% damage reduction for every 100 mana you have spent. Protection, using a cooldown, grants you 20% of your life as barrier, so your Flame Shield, Nova, and Ice Armor all give you extra shield. Warmth heals you per second based on enemies burning around you, and Veer's Mastery gives you minus 20% damage from close enemies. The interconnection of these passives and the gear we selected will give you incredible survivability, allowing you to stand still and tank elite groups and bosses if you'd like. You will be using Blizzard as an enchantment as well, so it casts itself periodically over you every 15 seconds. This is very useful as it follows you around, so you won't have to cast it somewhere enemies moved out of. Your Blizzard, Ice Armor, and Nova will chill and freeze enemies. Your Arc Lash, Flame Shield, and Nova will burn them as well. This means they'll be well controlled, and you can stop their attacks entirely while you blast away with fireballs and thin their numbers. Just make sure to always target the purple glowing enemies that give other elemental resistances. Equipment is a critical part of any level 50 plus build, as this is where the actual itemization begins to take shape in Diablo 4. For this Sorceress build, we'll be looking to get gear with specific bonuses to our main damage dealer skills, but also want to focus on boosting Pyromancy and Frost skill lines, elemental damage for fire and shock, damage to crowd control or close enemies, and attack speed. You should also look to increase stats with plus stats bonuses on gear. I have kept damage type resistances, poison, shadow, etc. buffs on gear, as it can be troublesome to deal with elemental packs. With this setup, our out of combat buffs rest at 50% against all damage types, and we can increase those when using our in combat skills and obtaining additional buffs. In general, you'll be in the situation where the items you're picking up are only about 50 to 70% of what you're actually looking for. You'll be lacking materials to transform rares into legendaries since you're just starting this phase. To counter this, you should focus on doing wishes and Helltides to obtain more legendaries that you can deconstruct. The Mystery Chest on the Helltide is the single best source for legendaries that can give up to 4 in 1 pop, but staying alive with your 170 Hellfire Crystals can be a challenge. Legendary aspects I'm using for this build are Aspect of the Crowded Sage. This heals you for X amount of life for each close enemy, up to a good amount of life per second. Protecting Aspect, when you're hit while not healthy, a magic bubble is summoned around you for 3 to 5 seconds. While standing in the bubble, players are immune to damage and can only occur every 90 seconds. The Storm Swell aspect makes you deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. The Frost Blitz aspect makes it so that Frost Nova gains an additional charge, but the cooldown per charge is increased. The aspect of Fortune makes it so that your lucky hit chance is increased while you have an active barrier. Aspect of the Frozen Wake makes it so that while Ice Armor is active, you leave behind exploding ice spikes that deal damage. Your ice spikes chill enemies for a little bit of percentage as well. Aspect of the Protector makes it so that damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier that absorbs damage for 10 seconds, which can happen every 30 seconds. The Mother's Embrace unique that you get from beating the game makes it so that if a core skill hits 5 or more enemies, you refund a percentage of the cost of that resource. And finally, Aspect of the Intercom makes it so that your damage is increased for each second that you stand still. Because you're so tanky with this build, this is not hard to accomplish. A very important and easily neglected aspect of equipment is the enchant and upgrade options. By this point in the game, you should have sufficient materials to upgrade your equipment 3 times or so. This actually does make a difference, so make sure that you do so. For enchanting, you may find the cost can be high, but you'll have to do Helltides to obtain the materials. But being able to remove an unwanted bonus can be very impactful to your overall build. Gems are also an important part of the game, as you can create slots in equipment and you can swap them in and out at no cost. Since this is a tanky sorceress build, I have focused on rubies for armor, which give you max life, diamond for jewelry, which gives you elemental resistances, and topaz on weapon, which increases our basic skill damage. From level 50 onward, you don't obtain any more skill points and instead gain 4 Paragon points per level. Paragon points are used to unlock nodes in a separate tree, and each node can give a minimum of +5 of any stat, percentage damage reduction, or significant boost to your damage output. As you level Paragon, you'll put points into willpower and intelligence, but you also want to take the Tactician glyph in your slot. So you'll have to assign 25 points of dexterity around it, and once you do this, you'll get a very nice boost to the rare nodes higher on your tree that boost your non-physical damage, which is all of your damage. Additionally, this glyph gives you 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. Nova, Ice Armor, and Flame Shield are all defensive skills, so they'll all trigger this effect. And if you're feeling nostalgic for our starter multi-element build, the Elementalist glyph gives you extra damage to all elements, which also works great for this build if you'd rather use that one. Final tips. I created this build because I wanted a no-stress, easy and chill run through dungeons and content when playing on my own. Its damage output is not top tier, but it gets the job done, and the survivability makes you highly resilient, so nasty surprises such as server lag spikes, teleporting, or even the Butcher are not too much of an issue. Since Helltide farming is such a big part of this portion of the game, not dying is crucial, and you'll be happy you took 20 seconds longer to complete an objective when it doesn't cost you 20 minutes of farming and currency to an unpredictable death. So that wraps up the Immortal Battlemage build. Really, the focus of this build was survivability, allowing you to farm gear in the Helltides and in Nightmare dungeons without dying. Helltides particularly, because dying there is a big penalty, which will allow you to gain equipment to put together more powerful builds when playing your Sorcerer class. Stay tuned for more Diablo 4 build guides, including build guides for each class, as well as level 50 guides and beyond. What did you guys think of our Immortal Battlemage build? What builds would you like to see in Diablo 4? How are you guys enjoying the game? Let me know in the comments below.